Hello, and welcome to Charted, an astrology podcast. My name's James, and today we are going to talk about the 12th house in astrology. So, as we've been moving through the houses, right, we've inevitably come to the end, and unfortunately, the end means we are going to end on somewhat of a bitter note because the 12th house is one of, if not the most challenging house in all of the houses. I kind of put it there right at the top of the 6th house. Some people might put the 8th above that. It doesn't really matter how you rank them necessarily individually. It's going to be a challenging house, no matter which way you slice it. It's also one that I find a lot of people struggle to understand. And so hopefully in this episode, we can really cast a strong light on this house, really get a sense for what it actually represents, what it's about, and how we can kind of deal with it a little bit. Now, starting with the astronomy, because that's where we always want to start, right? What can we see? Well, or really, where is it first, right? Let's start with that. So if we started at the first house, which is the eastern horizon, and we moved below the Earth through the houses to the western horizon, and then finally up through the sky, back towards the east, the 12th house being the last house means it's going to be just before we complete the circle, which means it sits right above the eastern horizon, about 30 degrees or so. There's a couple implications here. Number one, means it's in the sky, right? As we've discussed, houses in the sky deal with things that are more public. They're in the broader scope of the world. This one's going to be kind of hard to understand first once we get into some of the other significations, but let's table that for a second. Number two, it's on the eastern part of the chart, right? Makes sense. We've moved back to the east. The east deals with things that are from the self. They're self-centric, which means the challenges of the 12th house are predominantly going to come from our own self. The next thing is being on the eastern part of the chart, and specifically part of the eastern triad, or angular triad. The 12th house is a cadent house. And the cadent houses are depleted. They're what came before an angle. In this case, it's what came before the eastern horizon, the ascendant, which means it's what came before our birth. Because in a birth chart, the ascendant marks the time you were born. Right? It's the horizon at the time you were born. That's it's the beginning point of the chart. So the 12th house is marking what kind of happened just prior to your birth. But a cadent house is naturally depleted, right? It's spent its energy. So they take a lot of effort just to maintain. They tend to not give a lot of benefit. It's not to say that they don't have benefits. They certainly do. But they require a lot more energy to get kind of good use out of them compared to other houses. Another thing with where it's at locationally, if we look at what the sun is doing in that part of the sky, what is it doing in the 12th house? Well, being as it sits just above the eastern horizon, it means much like the 8th house, when the sun is there, if you move or look towards the east, you can't see. It's bright. And it's just after daybreak, which means you're kind of moving from a period of darkness to now, suddenly I can see, but wow, that's bright, right? If you have a dark room and you suddenly flip on the light, your eyes take a second to adjust. It's hard to see things. And that's kind of the dynamic that's happening here, right? The 12th house is going to have an obscurity to it because it's in a part of the sky where you can't see, or at least you can't see when the sun's there. Now, this obscurity is going to be different. We talked about this in the 8th house episode, right? You have the same dynamic over there. However, the 8th house deals with other people. It's in the west. And as we saw, that obscurity deals with secrets, specifically things we are hiding from other people or things other people are hiding from us. Because why? Because it's perceived as dangerous, physically, mentally, emotionally, what have you, or taboo. Then 12th house, though, is on the eastern side, which means it deals with us on a personal level. It's from me, which means the hiddenness is going to be things that are hidden from me and hidden by me. Right? We'll come back to that hiddenness in just a moment. What else can we say about the 12th house, and just in terms of general characteristics? Well, it's opposite to the 6th. So we'll come back to that. That means it's going to have a dynamic that is of the same character, of the same nature, but mutually exclusive. Right? Again, we'll come back to that. And then the last thing, and this is really what kind of completes the challenge with the 12th house, is that it's going to be the joy of Saturn. And Saturn is the greater malefic, right? Much like Jupiter is the greater benefic. We saw this in the last episode. Jupiter being the joy of the 11th house. The 11th house is a great place. It's got a lot of good stuff going on. The ancients called it the house of good spirit. The 12th house is going to be the inverse. Saturn is about negativity. Right? It wants to reduce things. It wants to isolate things. It wants to take a pessimistic and negative viewpoint. And so the 12th house is going to be a place where Saturn can naturally do and be those things. Right? It's able to do that negative stuff, that restricting stuff, that isolating stuff, that reductive stuff. Right? It can function there. Which means the 12th house, when we put all this together, is going to have, kind of broadly speaking, you could call it the house of loss. But really, there's going to be several kind of implications here. I kind of refer to it as a couple different things. It's the house of undoings. It's the house of loss. It's the house of hidden things. Right? I really tried to kind of think of one term that would fit everything. There really isn't. They kind of all rhyme, maybe not physically rhyme, but they're kind of significations. I'll kind of rhyme a little bit, I guess. So let's unpack this one by one. What do I mean by house of hidden things? Well, as I said, right, it's part of the sky where you can't see. It's also in aversion to the ascendant, which means it's blind spots, 30-degree aspect. That's like somebody sitting next to you. You can't really see. Right? You know they're there, but you can't see what they're doing. They're kind of in the corner of your eye. So it's vague. It's hard to tell. And that's the nature of the hiddenness of the 12th house. You kind of know something's going on if you really are aware, but you can't see it. In that 12th house, you can't see what's going on. It is hidden from view. More than any other house, the 12th house is hidden. And that means it's going to represent things that are hidden from us. This could be as simple as, I lost my keys. I don't know where they're at. Right? Or it could be things like an affair, right? Hidden from view. Affair probably also be a lot of 8th house stuff going on, but regardless, it's stuff that's hidden from us. But that means it's also going to be things that we, as I said, coming from the self, hide from ourselves, which means it's going to be the aspects of ourself that is naturally hidden from ourself, which is going to be what? It's going to be the subconscious. So on a psychological level, the 12th house is going to represent the subconscious. It doesn't have any active part in our thinking, only the passive subconscious part of our thinking. And the subconscious really drives a lot of who and what we are. The moon is also going to be really tied into the subconscious mind. But our subconscious is what drives a lot of our needs, or maybe not needs, but impulses. For example, right? If you grow up in a home that was naturally very, say you had abusive parents, right? Or maybe it was unsafe to show emotion. What do you naturally do? You suppress that. We've discussed that with the 8th house. But then what happens? You have subconscious things going on as a result of that atmosphere that are going to kind of be impulses that you have. When somebody gets close to you, what's the impulse? Right? Avoid. Why? or pull back. Why? Emotion was seen as dangerous. And that's that subconscious kind of kicking in and saying, hey, red flag, I got to do something about this. And you don't really control it, really. Like I said, it happens kind of subconsciously. And so this is going to lead to a whole lot of things. I'm not doing a very good job of explaining kind of the subconscious process here, but it's driving the ship. It's the engine in a lot of ways. Let me give an example from a sign perspective. Because the 12th house, whatever is there, we're going to feel like we don't have this thing because it only operates for us on a subconscious level, on a hidden level, right? And a spiritual level too, which I'll come back to. So for example, let's look at a Gemini rising. Geminis are stereotypically kind of seen as unstable. They're always changing their mind. They're mixing up my words here. They're kind of moving all over the place like a hummingbird, flitting here and there. They're flirting too, I suppose. But Geminis are constantly changing, constantly always paying attention, right? Why? What's the 12th house? It's Taurus. What's Taurus about? Stability, safety. So what does that mean? It means for a Gemini rising, or any Gemini planet for that matter, the thing that they inherently feel like they don't have, that feels absent, that feels lost, that feels hidden from view, is going to be safety and stability. It's going to be that Taurus quality. And so the natural then kind of response, subconscious response, is to do what? Always pay attention to your surroundings. Always change your mind when a better option comes around. Why? Because that's what's going to give you a safe approach. Geminis are naturally pretty conservative with their money, with their wealth, things like that. Why? Because they're always trying to hedge their bets because they don't feel safe. Right? That's the inherent quality going on. I don't have this thing. It's the subconscious quality going on. And if consciously they feel totally fine, subconsciously it's kind of always there. And that's not to say that your whole life you grow up as a Gemini rising feeling, oh, I'm never safe. That's not quite what I'm saying. But I'm saying the natural dynamic for that sign is, hey, this was how I was raised. It's what I had as a child. And so what you do with it then, and all of those implications, all of those impulses that kind of drives within the chart is something you have to work on and deal with. In some cases, you don't have to do much to deal with it. In some cases, it's much more difficult, especially if your 12th house ruler is afflicted. Or if you've got planets in the 12th house too. Because that's the other thing. If you put planets in the 12th house, what happens? You feel like those planets are absent. You feel like you don't have a connection to those things. They manifest subconsciously. If you have the moon in the 12th house, like myself, you grew up in an atmosphere where the mother or the motherly qualities were absent. Even if your mom was around, the nurturing, the emotional connection, the attachments, those were from a place that happened or didn't happen in a way that as a child you understood. They didn't feel there. They felt absent. So they manifest subconsciously because as humans, we still have all those qualities. We still have emotions. We still have attachments. But as a child, you didn't know how to consciously deal with those things. So what do? Fall back. Subconscious has got to deal with it now. And so that's the nature of the 12th house. It's representing this kind of subconscious part of us, which means anything there is going to feel hidden and it's going to operate in a very subconscious way. What are some implications of that? Number one, it means it's going to represent things that totally trip us up, which is why the 12th house is the house of undoings. I also like to call it the house of vices, right? The second house is the house of virtues, kind of the shadow of that is the house of vices. Why? Because things that trip us up. If subconsciously we have impulses that our child mind is doing because it felt they were necessary for survival, but they're not things that are healthy for us on an individual level or a relational level or an emotional level or what have you as an adult, those impulses are naturally going to cause you problems as you age. Relationships is an easy way to see that play out, right? People talk about attachment style, avoidant, and so forth. Avoidant, anxious, what have you. Those are all what? Things that come from, right, childhood, kind of your subconscious and how it was oriented around what was necessary? What did I learn as a child that was healthy or not healthy? And it gets ingrained in that subconscious part of our being, and then suddenly we have impulses. Hey, I'm an avoidant. I'm getting close to this person. Oops, pull away. Right? The subconscious says, got to get out. It's not safe. It's not the fault of the person, per se. Sometimes it is. But that's the impulse from the inside, happening in a way I don't understand. Why? Because it's 12th house. And so that's the nature of what the 12th house is going on. So it's going to represent things that we do, right, to ourselves as a byproduct of not really fully being healthy down there. Sometimes it is healthy, and we still make mistakes and trip ourselves up, right? We choose actively sometimes to do stupid stuff. For example, this is a very surface level example for sure. I'm 37. I'm not a spring chicken anymore. I'm certainly feeling the age. It's not even that old, but I was earlier this year, beginning of the year. Actually, I think it happened January 1st. It might have been December 31st. But my kids got a stomp rocket for Christmas, if you know what that is. It's like a little launch pad for a foam rocket, and you step on it or you can jump on it, and it shoots air through a tube into the rocket, and it shoots up in the air. Well, I took my kids to the park to play with this because they got it for Christmas. And me being not in my 20s anymore, I jumped up and tried to slam down on it, shoot that thing as high as I could, and what happened? I landed on my ankle wrong and rolled it and sprained it and was on crutches for like 2 months. So that was a conscious decision, but it was something that's the nature of the 12th house. It's things that we do to trip ourselves up. In that case, physically trip myself up, right? Against our own best interest. Because we didn't activate Saturnian side. We didn't activate restraint. Or in some cases, we did. We activate too much restraint. Hold ourselves back when we shouldn't have. Right? Miss out on opportunities because we didn't apply for the job when we should have. Right? So 12th house represents the things that trip us up in life. Most of the time, though, they're going to be mental, emotional, psychological. I gave some kind of surface level examples there with my foot and applying for a job, but right, things I mentioned like the impulse from like an avoidant, right? That all has to do with our upbringing, and that's kind of the source of it. So to untangle the 12th house, most cases means you got to do a lot of self-reflection to figure out, hey, subconsciously, why am I doing what I'm doing? Right? So that's one of the things you need to remember. Especially if you've got a lot of 12th house planets, it's always first thing. Look at the self first. What am I doing? Right? How do I unpack who I am and what I've been through? Because it might help me understand. Because naturally, 12th house is not a house that's easy to understand because it's hidden. But you can unearth it. What else is going to represent? Well, 12th house is going to be the house of loss, which means it's going to be about losing things. This could be physical things, right? You lose your keys, you lose your job, you lose a friend, a family member, a spouse. You lose your house, right? Anything that deals with loss in some physical way certainly is going to be 12th house. But also is going to represent loss of other things, loss of your mind, right? Loss of a relationship, loss of humility, loss of, right, agency. So a lot of things you can lose in life, and the 12th house represents right? It's the area that shows, hey, this is where we lose things. But losing things isn't always bad, because sometimes we need to lose in order to get better. For example, right? Part of success comes from failing. Successful people have lots of failures, but the challenge with failures, you learn from it. Right? That's the key thing. And the 12th house is going to show us time and time again where we fail, where we fall, where we lose something. And the challenge with it is then to learn from it. To always say, hey, I lost this thing. How can I get better? I lost this piece of me. How can I improve? How can I change? To adapt, to get better, to grow. So 12th house can be very good for us on a personal level, but it's going to be challenging. Another aspect to losing and to loss is when you lose something, you're reducing, right? And as I mentioned from the beginning, the nature of Saturn is to reduce and specifically to isolate. Saturn likes to take a group of something and slowly pull one piece apart, isolating each of the components so they can see them independently. But the thing is, when things are isolated, they're alone. And so the 12th house is going to also represent where we are alone and how and where we are isolated. In a physical way, this means the 12th house is going to represent places that isolate us. Prisons, right? Hospitals, things of that nature. It could also be retreats. You go on a retreat to isolate, to be alone. It's also going to show how we handle isolation. Some signs handle it a tiny bit better than others. But each of the signs handles isolation slightly differently. But 12th house is going to represent how we handle isolation, our need for it. If you have a lot of 12th house planets, chances are you're going to need a lot of isolation in your life. Sometimes it's going to be forced on you. Sometimes it's going to be something you're drawn to. 12th house people, or people with very prominent 12th houses, tend to need a lot of alone time. Because that's how those planets, especially when you have a lot of planets there, right? That's how they kind of function. They function alone. And the 12th house is a very lonely place. Some of the things that it's going to represent is foreign lands, but not foreign lands in the sense of where we go to grow or to challenge or to see and find new things, but really foreign lands in the sense of I'm isolated from everybody, right? You get sent on a business trip and now you're away from all your friends and family. And so that's the nature of the 12th house, or part of the nature is to be alone, to be isolated. And if you think of the subconscious in a lot of ways, it's isolated from the rest of us, from the conscious self, the thinking mind. And one of the negative byproducts of being alone, obviously loneliness can lead to depression. 12th house really can deal with depression a lot. Is that it leads to a lot of uncomfortable things. But it can also lead to a lot of good things. I'll explain both here. Uncomfortable, obvious results would be depression, loneliness, and so forth. But also when you're alone for a long time, what happens when you don't have those social connections? You start to pick up habits that are not really oriented around living in society. If you're never interacting with people, why would you ever have habits that are conducive to interactions? For example, you could start talking to yourself. You could start doing things that are naturally not very comfortable for other people. Walking around the house naked, right? If you have people over and you're still walking around the house naked, they're going to kind of look at you funny. Maybe best case scenario. Worst case scenario, probably get a visit from the police. So, right, that's just an example, kind of a goofy example. But that's what I'm saying. It's 12th house isolation can be kind of hard to deal with. It can lead to a lot of crazy things. On the flip side, when you're alone, what happens? You think. You can be introspective. You can connect to yourself, but you can also connect to something else. What is the something else? Well, I think I might have hinted at this earlier, but you can connect to spirit or spirituality. The 12th house in a lot of ways deals with the beyond, right? The primordial. So the 12th house is going to be the house where we really connect to spirituality. Now, I want to make a distinction here. In terms of kind of religious, God, spirits, all that kind of stuff, here's how I see it and understand it from my own studies, experiences, and just practice. The 9th house deals with our religion in terms of beliefs. The 3rd house deals with our religion, maybe, but our practices, right? If you have some spiritual code or some religious belief system that has certain things you would do on a day-to-day or week-to-week basis, right? Go to church once a week, go to a temple once a week, or if you pray every day, or, right, you have some kind of rituals that you do, that's a 3rd house thing. The 8th house deals with stuff that's taboo. So it deals with spirituality in the West, generally, like astrology, because it's seen as taboo. But it's not inherent to that. It's not inherently about connecting to a god or spirits or anything like that, except in the case of things that are dangerous, in which case, yes, then it could. But the 12th house is really the house where we kind of connect to God or gods or spirit, or however you want to phrase it. Why? Because that connection only happens between you and higher power, whatever that higher power is to you. It's something you do alone. You can do it with other people, an organized religion if you want. But the reality is it's something that connection really only happens within you in a way that you can see. Nobody else can see it. And so that's where we find is in the 12th house, is that connection to spirituality or God. And how we handle that. And so when we're alone, we can be introspective. When we're alone, we can have that connection. Because it's a singular connection. It's about me and the higher power, not us, per se. Now, one last thing. The 12th house, I've seen it kind of referred to as the house of hidden bed pleasures. I've seen that in a couple places. Certainly read about it in certain places. I know certain astrologers would associate the 12th house with sex. Or maybe not sex, I don't know. Personal experience has been it mostly refers to affairs, or really what we do in private with somebody else. Because 12th house is a private place. It's things that are hidden. But I don't find it particularly important in the realm of sex and romance. Now, if you have planets in the 12th house, right, what does that mean? It means there are things that you naturally kind of grew up having absent. Whether physically absent, like a father or a mother, or kind of archetypally absent, right? You had a present mom, but a mom who didn't emotionally nurture you, right? Didn't show you how to build emotional connections. That would be like the moon in the 12th. If you have a planet like Mercury in the 12th, what did you have? You had a family dynamic that didn't allow for you to understand how to communicate or how to logic your way through something, to kind of use those mercurial skills. And that doesn't mean you don't have it, but it means that those planets tend to operate subconsciously. And so in a lot of cases, you got to kind of dig in to figure out how to use them if there's something that needs to be more active. I will say Jupiter is probably the only planet that doesn't struggle in the 12th house for whatever reason. Pretty much everything else does. It tends to be a hard spot for it. But Jupiter naturally is actually a pretty good spot in the 12th for whatever reason. So, to sum up, the 12th house is going to be the house of hidden things, the house of loss, the house of the subconscious. It's what we don't know about ourselves. It's what we don't know, period, right? Stuff that's hidden from our own view. Or it's the things we tell ourselves to lie to ourselves, to keep something hidden from our own sense or our own view. Oftentimes it's funneled through the subconscious. 12th house deals with loss, when you lose things, both basic material things, but also important things, relationships, people, houses, homes, material goods, and so forth. Our mind, possibly. And then finally, the 12th house represents isolation and loneliness and the places that keep us in isolation, the things that put us in isolation, like prisons. And also what we do and how we handle being alone and being isolated from society, being isolated from others. Now, I mentioned early on that the 12th house is in the sky, so it has a public element to it. And this is true. People can actually see a lot of what's going in our own 12th house. Why? Because they see the subconscious playing out. We don't always see it, though. Why? Because it's subconscious. But they see the way it's kind of acting out. They'll see that part of us. Also, if we get isolated from the world, people can kind of still see that to an extent. It's us who's isolated from them, not them from us, if that makes sense. As an example, if you go to a faraway country on a business trip, because you're forced to by your company or what have you, you're still kind of out in the world, but your feeling is, I'm isolated. I don't know anyone here. I'm not near my friends and family. Right? And so that's the nature of the 12th. There's still a strong element of it's out in the world. But for us, it's kind of hidden in plain sight in a lot of ways. Now, if we look at it from the house perspective, let's talk about the opposition here. Because as I mentioned at the beginning, the opposition from the 6th to the 12th means they're of the same nature, but of mutually exclusive qualities. What's the nature and the qualities that are mutually exclusive? Right? Well, the 12th house deals with obstacles. But it's physical obstacles. It's obstacles we deal with in the world, obstacles we deal with from other people, and also servitude towards others, right? Whether ourself or them to us. The 12th house deals with personal obstacles, mental obstacles. It's the house of undoings. It's the things that trip us up. And most of those mental and emotional, psychological obstacles are subconscious. Right? They trip us up because we aren't aware that we're even doing them. And that's the challenge. The other aspect is let's talk about servitude for a second. I said 12th house deals with spirituality, and it's how we handle servitude to a higher power. Right? Whether we serve it or not. Right? How we deal with the beyond. 6th house deals with service to others. And so this is the dynamic going on. Now, if we look at the other aspects the 12th house makes, right? Let's look at the squares, since we're doing the hard ones first. The 12th house is in square to the 9th, to the 3rd. How does this make sense? Well, the 9th house deals with what? It deals with our belief systems. And it deals with how we go out into the world to grow ourselves. And if we're moving out into the world, I've already mentioned this, right? That can be naturally very isolating because it puts us in positions where we don't know what we're doing. It's a new experience. It's a new thing. And that's naturally going to cause a lot of tension on us on a kind of individual level, but it's also going to bring out a lot of our subconscious things. Right? It's going to challenge them. Is this safe? How do I interact? On the flip side, right, as I said, it can be very good because it allows us to grow very easily, right? It challenges the things that are holding us back, which forces growth. The 3rd house is our daily practices. It's our day-to-day. It's our local space. Well, if we're isolated within our local space, then that's obviously going to be very challenging. It's hard to interact with or kind of do a lot of our normal stuff if we're isolated in our local space. That means we're really, truly alone. The other aspect of that is our daily habits and our daily rituals and so forth are really going to be driven, as I said, by our subconscious. And so what we do on a day-to-day can influence our subconscious, kind of help heal it. Alternatively, it can help harm it, right? Make things worse. lead to a lot of our own problems. 12th house deals with undoings. And so if our daily habits are poor, right, we get up and smoke 3 packs of cigarettes and, eat a 2,000 calorie breakfast and then don't do anything all day, no activity, it's obviously going to be very detrimental for you on a physical level. That's the undoing part of the 12th house. And so that's the square aspect there. In terms of the trine aspects are going to be the 4th and the 8th, the other 2 psychological houses, right? The 4th is in natural trine aspect, is an easy flow because, the 4th deals with private life. It's our private self, our conscious, kind of how we're processing things internally, our internal world. And that obviously is naturally going to stem from our subconscious and feed into it. And obviously, our private world is naturally conducive to wanting to be alone. When we're alone, that private world can really flourish. Right? So that's the trine aspect between the 4th and the 12th. And then from the 8th to the 12th, they're both, again, dealing with psychological stuff and things that are hidden. And if something's hidden from you because it's a secret, right, that naturally makes sense. Right? It's an easy flow there. It's an easy connection. What about the sextiles? Well, the 12th house is going to be sextile to the 10th and to the 2nd. Let's tackle the 10th first. The 10th house, how does that make sense? How is there opportunity? Because the sextile is an opportunistic aspect. Well, the 10th house represents, right, the height that we can achieve or get to, what we're trying to climb up to in our charts. And the thing is when you get to the top, what happens? You're alone. And there's a saying, it's lonely at the top. Right? Not everybody climbs to the top of their career or anything like that, but the top of the chart's a lonely place. You have perspective. And so the natural, beneficial, opportunistic quality there is as we kind of climb to the top, it gives us perspective to help us unpack what's going on in the 12th house, all that hidden stuff. The other sextile is going to be the 2nd, our personal resources, but really our support systems. And this one, I think, is much more influential in a lot of ways, in that our support systems, especially growing up, are naturally going to shape or give opportunity to shape how our subconscious is working. So if we reorient our support systems, it's going to provide a lot of opportunity to reorient our subconscious. Right? Support system, if you want to add a therapist to your support system, that's obviously going to go a long way towards helping the mind. Now, what about the aversion aspects? Well, let's tackle the 150-degree aspects. Those are going to be the 7th and the 5th. The 7th is an aversion because, the 7th deals with other people. It's close partnerships. Well, the 12th house is about isolation. It's about loss. That's something that's naturally very uncomfortable and very different from other people. It's hard to be in contact with somebody else if you are alone. The 5th house represents our creativity, creations, our passions. And again, our children too. And again, loss, isolation. Loss is kind of, in a lot of ways, right, the opposite of creation. Not fully, but in a lot of ways, they are not resonant at all. The other aspect of that is children. Being isolated from your children is going to make it very hard to raise them. So that's the disresonance there. Lastly, you're going to have disresonance between the 11th and the 12th. The 11th being, right, social groups, friends. It's the abundance you get from acting out in the world. And the 12th house is the loss that we have from the world. Right? That's obviously naturally disresonant. And then finally with the 1st, it's disresonant because it's dealing with an aspect of ourself that's subconscious, that we can't really control innately. We can only control it kind of in an oblique manner, indirect manner. And that's the natural discomfort. Our subconscious drives us to do things that we're not even aware of. And again, it's hidden from view. So that's the 12th house. I hope that you enjoyed this podcast. I hope it makes sense. As I said, it can be a confusing house. If you have questions, feel free to reach out. You can email me, james@jdastrology.com, or if you want to book a reading, maybe you have a pretty 12th house heavy chart and want to discuss it, by all means, reach out to me. You can also go to my website, jdastrology.com. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed our kind of movement through the houses and finally finishing up with the 12th. And I hope you have a lovely week, and thank you for listening. Bye.